And we are live. I'm here with Jefferson Lee. Great name there. And this is like, semi a continuation of his stream, because he had his stream and then he took like a half-hour break, and now he's here with me, and I was in his side chat. I had invited some others to possibly join us. Like, one guy is feeling under the weather. Other people didn't respond or whatever. Yeah, we just started the stream, Hagar. It was supposed to start a little while ago, but I was pretty laid back about it because I was like, if he streamed on his channel until I think 6:34 Eastern time. So, he had to take a little break to get some food and water and whatever. So, I said, no rush, just take a break and make this kind of like a continuation stream or whatever.
No problem.
So, some of the stuff we were talking about, one thing that we were talking about on his stream was I made a comment about paleo conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a fan of paleo conservatives. I think we need, if the Republican Party had more paleo conservatives, I think we'd be in better shape. But one of the problems is we have all these neocons who don't fight. I feel like the Republican Party is getting a little better because you saw that video that they put out, right?
Yeah, the most recent they're more effective. What are the more actually at least semi-effective propaganda pieces? It was all like the left-wing violence, like about a 50-second clip.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a minute or so, like the left 2018 unhinged.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So yeah, that was really cool. I mean, because normally the Republican Party, like the actual party, you won't see them being like that blunt. You know what I'm saying? Like, normally it's everything is just like, we got to play nice, we got to be fair. I did this one video about an article on the Alinsky tactics, and it was from like a year ago, but I wanted to do the article anyway because I found I was like, this is good stuff. And at one point it talked about how like the Republicans that you have going on with like this longer, your old guy. I'm sorry, am I womping?
You jumped out for a second. I'll just go back a couple words.
Okay, so they were talking about how the Republican Party is no longer like, the guy who drives a beige Buick and likes to garden in his spare time and just wants no trouble. That, you have, like, for the first time in a long time, you have young people who are conservative and they're fighting. Like, I've always been a conservative, but I wasn't like fighting. It was just kind of like, whatever, okay, I vote, I like to say that I was purple pilled. And now I'm like, when I found out that there were real communists operating inside the United States, I was like, what? And I found this out quite, I mean, like I said, I was a purple pilled conservative. I would watch like Tommy Lahren and, Ann Coulter. And the way that I found out there were communists in the United States was last April. I went to watch Ann Coulter, and I would watch her like pretty much every weekend. I'd sit down and relax, like Saturday night or whatever, watch a couple interviews from Ann Coulter the previous week and Tommy Lahren and maybe some stuff from The Suggested. So I'd watch a few videos, that was like a relaxation thing that I would do like on Saturday nights. And when I went to watch the interviews with Ann Coulter, like the first interview, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to speak at Berkeley, da 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 da. And then the next one was, I don't know if I'm going to be able to speak at Berkeley. And I'm like, finally, I started like, because of how they were talking about it, I went and I did digging. And then I had heard about the Milo event, but I assumed that it was like Black Lives Matter. So I was just like, whatever. But then I discovered that it was actually communists who were like rioting over the Milo Yiannopoulos thing. So that's when, I started watching Milo. I started, looking into the communists and stuff. And I really started waking up and becoming more politically aware and watching what was going on and trying to talk to people and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally draw, and I used to think a little bit more along your lines, but I don't personally draw, and I do agree with you fundamentally, but I don't draw a big distinction between what we would call a communist and a member of Black Lives Matter, or even a feminist or a member of these like ridiculously overly militant gay rights or trans rights activists. I think.
Well, at this point, I'm more awake, and I realize that Black Lives Matter is a communist movement. But this was April of 2017 when I woke up from being a purple-pilled conservative to actually starting to know what's going on, in a more real way.
Yeah.
So and I opened my channel. You opened your channel right after Charlottesville, and I opened my channel, I think, the weekend before Charlottesville. So our channels are about the same age.
Yeah, I think I will say this, and this obviously doesn't apply to you in light of what you just said. I do think that a lot of American conservatives need to start viewing the current political situation differently than they do now, and differently than the conservative media establishment presents it to them. I think, yes, we could talk about communism almost in the Cold War or Stalinist tradition, and I would agree that there certainly is an attempt to subvert our country, and it's been quite successful from the left. But it's certainly not a form of purely economic warfare. I think that certainly has been tried by the left in terms of the classic bourgeoisie versus proletariat narrative that was largely ineffective in getting the reaction the left wanted back in the 40s and 50s and even prior to that. I think what we're really seeing here is, and I've discussed this a little bit on my stream. I don't want to repeat myself too much if you've listened. If not, whatever, it's all good. We're here to mix new ideas. I call it, and I stole this from somebody else, I call it bio-Leninism. It's letting third worlders into your country that could never really compete with most of us in a free market setting, and empowering them through agitation and propaganda. And we see this as a tactic of the left, and they do the same thing with the transgender movement, or the Black Lives Matter. The elite will drum up lunatics from the lower class to go after the rest of us in the middle class, and it's a problem. That tactic certainly is working, and that, I would agree, is an Alinsky tactic. I think there's no denying that. But I do make it clear, and not to you, obviously, because you're red pilled and you understand this, that we are facing more than just some type of Marxist economic doctrine. There's other stuff going on here.
Right, and this is the kind of stuff that I take it in, and then I digest it out, and I try to spit it out in the form of a video. So, Baby Wino says, "Turd worlders."
Yeah, exactly.
Nice little play on words there.
Yeah.
That's cute. So.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously been the plan. The elites, for whatever reason, and this is a discussion that could be had. I mean, I'm not willing to die on any specific hill in this area, but for whatever reason, they certainly see the middle class, the overwhelmingly majority white middle class, let's just call it what it is, as a threat to their power structure. And it makes sense because high IQ people in the free market could potentially form a new elite, and they would be a threat to the power structure of the people who do in effect kind of own this country. And these are just age-old tactics that are being utilized. And if you go back, not even just to, let's say, the Bolshevik Revolution, but you can go back to feudalism. You can go back to these types of eras where when there was a threat to the king's type of throne, they would oftentimes drum up the peons, so to speak, to take out a threat, some type of aristocrat that might be threatening the throne or their absolute power. So I think we have to be very aware of these tactics. That Marx was someone who kind of put this stuff down on paper, but it's been used for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But I actually wanted to ask you a question, because it's very, very rare for me that I get to actually have a conversation with someone who watches some of my live streams. Of course, you've been doing this a while. When you're talking to someone in a chat, it's different than having a conversation. So you had mentioned more Republicans should be paleoconservatives. Now, I kind of want to make sure we're operating on the same definition here. So, what would you define a paleoconservative as?
So to me, like paleoconservatives are like Jim Jordan and Trump and Mike Huckabee. You know, they're not warmongers. They're all about America. You know, they're not playing these dubious games. They're not, you know, pulling this rhino shit. You know, so more of them. And I'm I feel like there's probably some decent, you know, people say like, oh, they're all rhinos, and I'm sure that there's plenty of decent Congress people that like people don't know their names. Like for a long time I didn't know Jim Jordan's name, and now I know his name, you know, and I think he's awesome. And you know, people like Trey Gowdy. I don't think I like him as much as other people do, but he's still very, very decent. And I just feel like, you know, I mean, we have a handful of these like rhino neocons that turn around and vote with the Democrats. The Democrats like basically never break ranks and vote with us. So, like, of course, like one of the worst things we have is Republicans who break ranks and vote with them when we're basically in this like war type environment. You know, someone like Shapiro is like a bad Republican because, you know, he says he's a Republican, but then like on what planet is he on that he doesn't understand what's going on with this Mueller thing? He's basically like siding with the Democrats about it. And I don't know, I think part of that is maybe because what his role is he basically watches all the news from the leftist sources and then he comments on it. And in theory he gives like a right-wing commentary, but maybe, you know, listening to the left constantly is like having an effect on him. Somebody said cuck Shiro.
Well, I think you know, Ben. I have Ben's around the same age as me. I think I'm going to be 32 in mid August, and I've followed his work for quite some time, and I've gone back and reread a lot of his old articles. I mean, Ben is not a fool. He's always been this way, and he's not an America first conservative, if such a thing even exists, and that could be something we could extrapolate upon. I think Ben knows exactly what he's doing. Ben is part of the opposition that is there simply to make money off of the discontent of the shrinking white majority in America. And of course, it doesn't mean that there aren't blacks or Latinos or any other ethnic group that are upset with the way America is going and have similar beliefs. But the overwhelming majority of Republican voters are white, so we have to just kind of call it what it is. Ben knows exactly what he's doing. He's a permanent fence straddler, and he's in it for the money. And he can't wait to be the first person who apologizes for the extremism of his conservative friends. And it's ridiculous. And anyone, even though I'm not a particularly big fan of voting, anyone who claims to like and engage in American politics that's going to come out and virtue signal over not voting for Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, A, they're obviously operating in the paradigm that voting makes a difference. So B, if you are operating under that paradigm, then you should go out and vote. For him to come out and say, "Oh, I'm a principled conservative, so I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump." I mean, it's absolutely preposterous. Hillary's obviously evil. She's obviously a warmonger, and he doesn't have a sense of national survival for the United States that a lot of us do. And he's, like I said, he's in it to make the money. He's obviously, he knows what's going on with the Mueller investigation, but rather than win or help people win, he would much prefer to go on Bill Maher and make money and do what he has to do. Now, do I wish I had the amount of money he had? Yeah, I'm sure he's doing quite well. But we could cash in and have establishment hacks give us paychecks all we want. But inevitably, our parents, or rather our parents, our children or our grandchildren are going to be living in a third world shithole if we don't actually stand up and try to win. And that is ultimately my main criticism of not only Ben, but probably 90+% of the Fox News staff as well.
Yeah.
You know, so that's that. I think that's a major issue for sure.
Yeah, I mean, do I have his stream open? Getting echo.
The echo could be coming from me, so you let me know. I asked the people in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, like, you have these people and they're just, they're just like such watered down for conservatism.
Okay, I mean, well,
yeah.
Let me see. Hold on a second. I might have a pair of headphones here. Let's see if I can.
Yeah, please.
Give me 1 sec, guys. I'll be right back.
Yeah, hang on, everybody. I have headphones in, so for some reason he's probably started to like get an echo of me into his microphone.
1 sec, guys.
Please hold for technical difficulties. So, yeah. So what I was saying is, yeah, you have a lot of conservatives that are like really kind of watered down, and Ben Shapiro is a great example. I mean, sometimes he's really good. Like when he reported on the memo, he was so excited. He was like, "It's memo day," and and he was actually like, "We're winning" and stuff. But other times he's like critical of Trump, and it's like, and one thing was, he was actually on board with Trump when Trump did the fuckery with Syria, and I wasn't on board with that. I was like, I really don't like this. I'm not off the Trump train, but I was not a fan of the fuckery in Syria because I am America first. He's putting in his earbuds. All right. You need to say that what do I need to say in an Indian voice, Ryu?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, good. That's a lot better. Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Gone.
All right. I mean, look, as it pertains to American conservatism, listen, I obviously agree that they are milquetoast. I obviously agree that that they're not saying or doing the right things. But I think we also have to fundamentally challenge the idea of what a right winger really is. And this is an argument that I get into with a lot of people that claim to be right wing, they claim to be conservative, is American conservatism does not have the proper footing, politically or philosophically, I think, to really do some significant damage to the left and win this culture war. Now, it is changing, and Trump has been a big part of that for a variety of reasons, but historically, being a right winger, and this is why I say that even conservatives are left of center on the historical, political paradigm. Being a right winger has almost always connotated an attachment of your people to, the soil. We are German and we belong in Germany, and this is our land and our people, and we put our people first. Unfortunately, the American conservative movement is, and I say this a lot on my channel, it comes very much from the tradition of William F. Buckley and this idea that being a right winger means to be fundamentally opposed to communism on an economic level. So a lot of conservatives come at these left-wing arguments from the basis of we have to oppose communism with capitalism, with the free market, but they don't have this visceral, for lack of a better term, blood and soil connection that has historically been attached to right-wing movements for better or for worse throughout history. And the issue here is that free markets are not as strong of an argument as blood and soil. And the left does use that argument. The left plays identity politics. The left tries to connect with people where they are in a way that the right does not. The right attempts to take this preachy type of pseudo intellectual means of reaching people, where the left has kind of been a broader populist movement in the sense that they talk to people where they are. A lot of Republicans, they will make these arguments, and they're not wrong, but they're also not right. They're somewhere in the middle. They'll make these arguments
Right.
of
Correct.
the left is crazy, the left is losing, and they are losing with whites because the left is increasingly moving their rhetoric towards people of color, third world immigrants, trannies, lunatic activists, homosexuals, and all this other stuff. But they are still talking to people where they are. They are engaging in a strong sense of identity politics, and they reach people on a visceral level that the right, for whatever reason, is afraid or unwilling or unable to do. Now, Trump was successful, not because he argued free markets. There's a really interesting point. I haven't really touched on this
Because
very
he
much.
talked to people, and he kept it real.
I would agree, but here's another interesting part that I think a lot of Americans are afraid to admit this, and I haven't really spoken about this on my stream. So we'll say this is exclusive to your channel. We look at Trump's speeches on the campaign trail. There was very little conversation about, okay, we have to have our free markets, and we're going to be principal conservatives. It was much more, the system is rigged. I know how it's rigged, and I am going to rule for you. There was an authoritarian air to Trump's candidacy that I, for one, thought was actually honest, and I liked it. I actually did like it. And I think that's part of the reason why he was successful, because the left has had this idea. They look at the disenfranchised, who are increasingly becoming quite franchised through affirmative action and whatnot, and they look at them and say, the system is rigged against you, and I'm going to rule for you. And that rhetoric works quite well. And in a way, all Trump did was turn that rhetoric back around towards the American middle class, and that's why he was elected. And we have to have a conversation about what this really means regarding our relationship with power and our relationship with government.
Yeah, and I think one thing is that he said what a lot of people have been thinking, and that a lot of people don't want to admit to others. And a lot of people, I think, are against the immigration, but it's like the media and, teachers taught it to where, people come down on you so hard. And a lot of people, finally, after everyone voted for Trump, I think him getting elected, people kind of went, wait a minute, this means other people think like me. So
Well,
just him getting elected helps people realize that, yeah, we all do think like this. And, we're starting, him picking on the media. People already hated the media, but people are like, oh, looking around and realizing, look, everyone else hates the media just like me. So, and it was happening before he even came out. I was seeing it in comments. There was a lot of people who were lashing out on comments of Yahoo articles. They were, Yahoo was constantly pushing an agenda for pro-immigration, and people were backlashing it hard in the comments. And I remember at one point, they did quite a few articles back to back for a few days in a row, and everybody was saying in the comments, people would say in the comments, whoever is strongest on immigration, we got to vote for them. Get the word out. We have to vote for whoever's the strongest on immigration. So people were ready for his message. People were already looking for someone to be strong on immigration. Maybe he or someone he had combing comments knew that that's what the people were hungry for. But I do believe that I had seen several people were posting, go to Numbers USA, their website was getting really popular. It was getting posted in comments everywhere. And then, of course, 4chan was like an army into comment sections. Um, and one of the downfalls we have is that 4chan has become about Jew hating instead of, the messages that we need to get out. Which, yes, 75% of Jews are on the left. So when we hate left, we do hate a lot of Jews. There are a lot of Jews who Jew left, they're one and the same. But there's no reason to alienate the 25% of Jews who are politically on the right. And, not all of them are cucky like Ben Shapiro either. There are some of us that are like, well, I don't know if you knew this, I'm actually Jewish.
Mhm.
But I mean, like, I'm a huge Trump supporter. I'm America first, I'm like hardcore, like, I reject all this stuff. And, one of the things that I know is personally, like, within the Jewish community, you have these, like, left leaning Jews who are trying to, like, I see it, they're trying to manipulate the Jews to try to pull them to the left. And so I've been, like, pushing back against that. Like, there's one guy who he had a really strong following blog around the same time as Luke Ford actually came out, which was about 10 years ago. And he still has a huge following on Facebook. And he's posted, I called him out on it and I said, like, you're a leftist. And he was like, no, I'm a conservative. I like to fish. And it's like, liking to fish does not fucking make you a conservative. And then eventually I saw that he blocked one of my accounts, but he's still posting all this like left leaning stuff. Like he'll post things like, why are Orthodox Jews so racist? Like this is like, left, it's like a left leaning mind fuck where you're trying to mind fuck, guilt people into the left leaning mindset.
Well, I think you're touching on something that's I think quite a bit edgier than I was ready to discuss, but I'll still go there. Look, obviously 4chan, whenever you have the ability to be completely anonymous, then you're going to have the ability to say increasingly crazy shit with zero consequences. And anyone who's done any type of, I'm not saying I'm a YouTube expert, far from it, but just 10 months or whatever of maybe a little bit more, 11 months of doing YouTube videos, yeah, you get some pretty crazy comments from people who don't have an avatar, or their avatar is something else and they can hide behind something. But I'll say this, I think that the fundamental question that a lot of conservatives or right-wingers, Christian right-wingers in particular, have of Jews is not so much that they're left-wing. It's that there is certainly a concern that Jewish people don't identify as white, and as such, they don't necessarily have the same story, same concerns, or same visceral type of political leanings that other people might have. Now, I'm not going to come out here and say that I think that Jews are responsible for male pattern baldness. That's preposterous, clearly. But what I will say is, I do think that there is a separate Jewish identity than from a historical, white European identity. And I do think that
Right.
someone who has a critical understanding of race needs to be aware of this. And one of the criticisms of Shapiro, and by the way, I have the same criticism, not just of Shapiro, but I feel the same way about Dennis Prager, the same way about Mark Levin. A lot of the kind of Jewish conservative movement is they are very much they're America first, or America first is tied with Israel. I don't like the idea that the American military, the American taxpayer, is being used as a vassal to help another country. Now, I'm going to say one last thing, and then I'll be more than happy to give you the floor here. Is just I don't blame a country or a group, be it Israel, be it Jews, right-wing Jews, left-wing Jews, whatever, for getting another entity to do their bidding. Okay, I understand politics is war. Politics is a zero-sum game. It
Right.
is what it is, and this is a conversation that needs to be had. But I do agree that some of the backlash towards even Jews on the right is that there are a lot of people, that they don't have an ethno state to potentially retreat to. And so they're going to go down with the ship in America regardless. And they do also think, and this is again a criticism I have of your Ben Shapiro types, is Shapiro will say things like, I don't care about the browning of America. Ideas matter. That's a literal Ben Shapiro tweet. Well, then
I know
yeah. And
he
I would
said
ask
that,
Ben.
and Alex Jones said that, and I actually think that that's not about them. That's not about Shapiro being Jewish. I think in that case, I think it's about Shapiro being so tied to the mainstream media. I think that's where that comes from.
Well, I think it's
So
both. I think it's both. I mean, listen, I don't blame somebody for advocating for their own people. That's the thing. I don't blame them. But also the conversation needs to be had about where do your loyalties lie, and will you make the right decision, and what country will that decision be made for? So my rebuttal to someone like Shapiro would say, okay, if you don't care about the browning of America and ideas matter, how would you feel about for lack of a better term, the browning of Israel? Why don't we just flood your country with Somalis? Obviously, he's going to say that would not be acceptable, and to an extent, obviously, I would agree. But this idea that ideas matter for America, that America is a nation of ideas, but that Israel or other countries are nations of blood and soil is an uncomfortable double standard that a lot of people that you see on 4chan are keenly aware exist, and that's a problem.
yeah, well, and another problem is, I mean, you say like the browning of like they say like the browning of America. Like here's the thing: is like if you get if you were to get people who were like Hispanic or black or whatever, and they actually like held American ideals, I think that would bother people less. But the problem is you won't get that. You know, I mean, I guess like from people who are like several generations back Hispanic, like if you look at places like Texas and Arizona that have Hispanics who have been here like 3, 4 generations, so long that like, no one in their family, like they don't actually have any relatives that they know that emigrated. Um, you get people like that, they're much more likely to be Republican, but it takes so many generations for that to happen. And the left knows that. The left is playing a game. So, the longer that Hispanics are here, the more likely they are to vote Republican. So there's that. But on the other hand, like, I don't think swarming a country with with even if you look at one point they had so much immigration from Germany that they had pockets and enclaves around the United States where people were speaking German and stuff. And that was one of the things that happened before the last time they closed our borders. And the reason why they closed our borders was to give those people time to assimilate, so that the Germans would marry like the Irish and stuff, so that people would assimilate to like the American ideal. And, and then what happened was when World War II came, the people in these enclaves didn't want to be associated with Germany anymore because of the stuff going on in Germany. So that's when they all started speaking English and you know, stopping, speaking speaking German, and when, they started to really assimilate. So like half of my ancestry, both of my grandmothers are German. So one grandmother definitely came here as a child and attended, like her parents brought her here when she was a child, and she attended a German Lutheran school. And then my other grandmother, she supposedly was born here, but after doing some digging, it looks like she lied to me. It looks like she actually was brought here, or actually came here at some point after having grown up in Germany. It's not real clear.
Well, I want to kind of touch back on one of the points that you made there. I obviously, it is a historical fact. I mean, Benjamin Franklin himself was concerned about the proclivity, excuse me, of German immigrants coming into the United States, particularly in the Pennsylvania area, which I believe is where he's from. But that's, again, I think that touches to some of the, and again, whether it was factual or not, some of the racialist ideas that the founding fathers had. You could look at a lot of their writing, and they had a very clear cut, or very well defined, rather, thought process and understanding about who they were, where they came from, and what types of traditions were important in the United States. Now, at this point in my life, I have some significant disagreements with the ideologies of the founding fathers, but at the very least, they did understand that race was real, that ethnicity was real, and that ethnos and race were one of the components of a successful, cohesive society. And so, to your point about Germans, I understand that Germans do have a slightly different tradition than, say, your traditional Anglo-Saxon Protestants that did make up a significant portion of the American colonies. However, Germans and British are infinitely closer to each
I was
other.
just going to say that. They're a lot closer,
Yeah.
so it was easy to eventually assimilate.
Well,
Continue.
they're infinitely closer in a shared story, a tradition, a shared set of values than anyone in Europe is with someone in Latin America or Africa. And, one of the reasons why I've become kind of black pilled to an extent on political action is because I don't believe that revolutions occur from the top down. I believe that revolutions occur from the bottom up. And when you start looking at things through this bottom up paradigm instead of this top down, we're going to get this leader and he's going to make everything okay. You start to develop a fundamental understanding about the importance of the characteristics of the people that make up your society. So this is where things like race and IQ questions do come into play. Okay, having a shared heritage, having a shared story, these things do come into play. Now, I'd be curious to know where your research comes from, but most of what I've read actually shows that many Hispanics actually show reverse assimilation. Because, and this is true of many of it I know in my own personal life, which I understand is anecdotal, but what you usually find in my experience, people that I've worked with, many Hispanic immigrants, I know many from Colombia, from that particular area, they'll come in. The parents are oftentimes very happy to be in a first world country because they've experienced the hellhole, and they are eager and willing to shut the hell up and perhaps, go to work and just be better than where they were. But I personally believe that it's downward or reverse assimilation where the children.
I think now it is.
I think it's always been that way.
Well, I think when you get to people who their families have been here so long that they don't speak Spanish, then you get people who are basically assimilated.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
I would agree that language is important, but I know many Hispanics
you get people who their parents came here, their parents assimilated. They're finding this a lot with the Muslims too. Their parents came here, their parents assimilated, but continued to speak the language, like brought them to, whether it's a Muslim service or like a Catholic service in Spanish or in a Spanish speaking area. And then one of the problems, I grew up in Buffalo, and there was some of the hijackers came from Buffalo from the 911 incident. They were called the Lackawanna Six. Lackawanna is like right next to Buffalo. It's technically a city, but it's like right next to Buffalo. So in that respect, it's kind of like a suburb. But anyway, so these Lackawanna Six, when I read up on it, because I was like, oh, there was some of that going on from where I grew up. And so when I read up on it, what I found was they got people who were like here and their parents had assimilated and stuff. And then when the radicals came over from the Middle East, they went into the mosques and they reached out to these, teenagers or whatever, or 20 somethings who grew up here and grew up assimilated, but then they turned around and they came and they radicalized them. So
Yeah, I would
definitely
say
they are seeing that. That's what they're seeing with the Muslims. They're seeing that like they're growing up assimilated, and then like the radicals are coming over from the other countries. There's a huge problem in the UK that
I
I've been
understand
running
that,
across.
but then here's the fundamental question for two things. The first thing I would say is, all right, with the radical, we can talk about language first. I mean, I would say, and I think this is fairly indisputable, that you know, blacks have been here for a very, very long time. We share the same language, and they have not assimilated, and that is not a
Right.
knock. That is not a knock on them.
For the most part, they haven't.
That is not a knock on them. I get the concept as someone who has seen my own neighborhood change. Okay, and I know you probably feel the same way about this. I get the concept of looking and feeling different than everyone else around me. It is going to alienate you. It is going to cause a problem. Now, as it pertains to, I think your point is factually correct for sure regarding radicalization within mosques. But there is a greater discussion here, which is why is it so easy for them to be radicalized? How come they're not targeting whites? They're not
Well,
because we're not going to identify against our own homeland. Effective
uh,
propaganda
I mean,
always pulls
that's
strings that exist naturally.
not so much in the United States, but they have a problem in the UK with redheads because they're playing on redheads always feel out of place in the UK. And so like it's like a big joke, the jihadi gingers. I think it's Katie Hopkins who talks about this a lot. And Tommy Robinson. So yeah.
Yeah, but again, they're still fundamentally targeting people that don't feel at home in society,
Exactly.
and so that's exactly what's going on here. So yeah, effective propaganda always pulls on the strings of reality. It is always rooted in a certain reality that is perceived by the target audience. So that is why I don't believe in any semblance of a multicultural or multiracial society. Um, I believe it is irrefutable that no matter where people are shipped from across the world, they will congregate with those who look and think like them and form similar types of societies no matter where they are located. And I think a lot of conservatives will say, well, it's an assimilation problem. But really the issue is no matter how many people no matter how much you want to put controls on immigration, the second the dominant race or dominant culture shrinks below a certain number or percentage of the population overall or in a certain area, another group will take over. And that is why I don't think we could have the based conservative and use that based
Well,
Latino conservative and use
and
that as an archetype.
all of this stuff is like, if you think about it, it's actually weaponry that the left has been using against the right. And I don't want to say Native Americans because those are like the quote unquote Indians, but like, people who are Americans for a few generations back. Um, so, you look at the left has been using the media to push out these ideas. And the reality is they know, um, they know that what they're saying is basically a lie because, what am I saying? I'm losing my train of thought. Stop looking at the chat. um, because in the communist constitution, they actually have a program where they plan on balkanizing the United States if they can take over. It's actually a constitution for North America. So they want to take over Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And the ones who wrote the Constitution is Revolutionary Communist Party. And they consider themselves the vanguard or the leaders of the communist revolution that they're trying to take place. And they are the same as that refuse fascism that runs around with the black signs. No, no! Those crazy people.
Well,
So,
obviously the Frankfurt School and the critical Marxists have always used divide and conquer tactics by which to get what they want, but to subvert countries. And I completely agree. But there is an issue that we need to discuss regarding this, which is, and I'm sure you would probably agree with this. Um, they don't like countries that are homogenous, and they don't like them because those countries are harder to divide. When you actually look, and this is not going to be popular with some people that are not as obsessively well read as you or I, but when you look at someone like Martin Luther King, for example, I mean, Martin Luther King was a communist. Martin Luther King was funded by rabid left-wing leftists, and you could even find quotes by Malcolm X talking about how this was a problem. You could find Malcolm X saying like, yeah, the MLK is getting his money from these left-wing agitators,
yeah,
and
Malcolm X was actually better. He actually he told blacks not to vote for Democrats. People
well,
don't
yeah,
even realize that. And then
well,
like they
yeah,
killed him after he said that.
well, there is that, but what I'm trying to say is the critical Marxist members of the Frankfurt School, they correctly played on racial tensions in the United States because they knew that the legacy of Jim Crow, the legacy of slavery, which is more complex than people want to touch on, would probably be insurmountable. And I think that it is. I think that the legacy is largely insurmountable. It is so easy for the left to pull on the strings of the past regarding racial tension that at a certain point you have to have a conversation and say, can this go on forever, or are we hurting each other? And that is why I'm not a fan of diversity, because I think it inherently makes your country weaker, and it just causes not only a war of ideas in the worst sense, not the best sense, but a war of civilizations or cultures within your own borders, where instead of having political debates about who's going to pave the roads and lesser scale economic questions, we are now having political debates and elections about the very soul of our country. And this is not something the founding fathers ever intended. Are you still there? Did I lose her? Guys in the chat, let me know if this is still up and running. All right. I don't know if I lost Analytical Chick on her own stream. This has never happened to me before. This is interesting. Are you there, AC? Hello, 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 hello. All right. It's all me. All right, no problem. So I will entertain until AC comes back. I certainly didn't meet anyone, ladies and gents. Um he's scrolling up. Obviously, ton of familiar faces from my stream. Hello, all members of the Lee Army. Great to have you guys here. Um Talks about the Mexican election, guys. Obrador is going to win. We all know it. He's the pick of the establishment, and Mexican politics is so corrupt it makes American politics look reasonably sane and normal, which of course it is not. John Smith, my man from my old stream, says Malcolm X was better. MLK was an agent. I think I would agree with that. I think I would absolutely agree with that statement. Um, Stalblitz says it's not live stream. Take two. Let me call up here. Hold on. One sec, guys. All right. Escape from California. This is a great point. It says many laugh at Canada's invasion, but if Canada is America's hat, then we have a developing case of lice. Dude, I agree. Again, I say this a lot. We can laugh at the left. We can make fun of them for forever, but they are winning. They have turned the tide in a certain direction. And yes, Canada's a joke, But because they share a landmass with us, their problems are fundamentally our problems. The Glaucon Khan says, "Am I alt-right?" I don't know if I'd identify as alt-right. People would call me that. At this point, I'm probably like a reactionary in terms of how I view my politics. I definitely have disagreements with the alt-right, but I do think that there needs to be a more honest discussion about the role of ethnicity and race in the political landscape. Looks like we lost Analytical Chick. Is she going to return? Am I streaming? This is still up. This is crazy. This has never happened to me before. I apologize, guys. Trying to see what's going on. Oh my God. I didn't hack anyone's channel, guys. Let's see. Any plans for the 4th? Not yet. Stream is still on. Well, guys, I guess I'm going to I'll take the second. If you don't know who I am, so I don't know how many people in the stream are just my followers or Analytical Chick's followers. Again, I want to thank her for having me on. If you don't know who I am and you like what you've heard so far, please head over, subscribe to my channel, comment on everything, and feel free to join the Lee Army if you haven't already, and follow me on Twitter at Jefferson Lee TV. So I'll actually put that link in the chat description.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what you should not do is when you're streaming, you should not kick your plug out of the wall by accident.
That's not good. That's certainly not good.
Sorry about that, guys. I was like, I hope he keeps talking. Oh my, come on, reboot.
Yeah, don't worry. I was just kicking it with the chat. So I don't know what the last thing that you heard was.
I don't remember.
All right. Well, I mean, just to kind of touch on some things, and again, I don't know. I don't want you to bore the chat by continually harping on the same stuff, but I would say again, the argument that let's say that free speech or absolute insane over the top freedom of association is good for a society, I think that I would definitely disagree with. We have to have some semblance of shared ideas, some semblance of a shared story to have a constructive society. And liberals like to hide behind this idea of we need aggressive free speech, or we have to have these arguments over the very moral fabric of our society. When I think that even the founding fathers, like I said, who I would fundamentally disagree with on a lot of different things, would agree that society should be made up of people who think about 80% the same way, if not more. And initially, elections in the American tradition were not meant to decide the very soul of the country. They were meant to decide relatively small political issues compared to what we're facing today.
Well, I look back even when I was a kid, the difference between, Reagan and Mondale was not as big as the difference between Clinton and Trump. I mean, they were fairly similar even back then, which of course things had already changed. And the more you go back, the more the candidates were pretty similar to each other. Especially it changed in the 60s, but like in the last 10 years, I feel like Clinton Bill Clinton, I feel like he did a lot of stuff to the Democratic Party behind the scenes that people didn't know about. And then people really started to notice changes in the Democratic Party during Obama. And I think that a lot of people wanted to vote him out for the second term. but people just did not like Romney.
Well, the Republicans did what they always do, which is lose on purpose.
Yep, exactly.
They don't want to win. They are in the tank for left wing ideas, and they don't care. And someone in the chat, JMYC, was very sharp, says voting was to figure out how to get something done, not who or what should be our national character. And that's exactly it. We've taken this concept of abject freedom, and it's gone almost too far. There were strict controls over who should be in the country because the founders believed that a certain type of person from a certain part of the world would be able to produce a similar type of outcome over time. And this, by the way, I personally believe that this is one of those things that is deliberately left out of history textbooks or any semblance of political analysis, the importance of a common group making political decisions for themselves. The American people have been hoodwinked into thinking that a propositional nation is possible, and I would argue that it's completely impossible.
You mean like overly free and stuff?
No, propositional refers to okay. So let's put it this way: we have this idea now in the United States where if you set foot in America and you have an American passport, you're American. Now, that is de facto true in terms of your citizenship, but it is not true in terms of your bloodlines. It is not true in terms of the type of person that you are. I cannot go to Africa tomorrow, not that I would want to, or Haiti and be Haitian. Even if they give me citizenship, I am not Haitian.
Yeah, well, and even going back to, I mean, we were talking about. Sorry.
No, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, so even going back to like we were talking about Jews in America, the Jews who are most Americanized are the ones whose families have been here a long time. The ones who, you know, their families haven't been here that long, though, you know, you have a different, you know, the ones who are like, my family's been here like 5, 6, 7 generations, you know, over 100 years. Those are the ones that are voting Republican.
Well, let me ask you a question. If the Democrats immediately took a hyper strong pro-Israel stance tomorrow, where would their loyalty lie? Because that's a question. That's a serious question. How many of them would stop voting Republican and vote Democrat?
Yeah, that's probably a good question. I know that there definitely are a lot of Jewish people who, you know, really think in terms of like America and, you know, English being the language and stuff. Like I've seen people go on rants about like this one girl went on a rant about 10 years ago on Facebook when you could actually post stuff like this on Facebook. And she was like, I was on the subway today and I saw yet another ad in Spanish. And she's like, and I'm so sick of this. I'm sick of pressing 2 for English. I'm sick of, you know, constantly seeing. She's like, what is going on? I'm sick of this. Da, 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 you know, rant over. And tons of people came in and like agreed with her in the comments. Nobody like, I mean, maybe there was like one person who virtue signaled and like lashed out at her, but for the most part, people agreed with her.
Well, I mean, I certainly understand that. Again, getting to the concept of identity, even if someone is Chinese, they wouldn't want to have to learn Spanish, right? Because it would make their life harder. It would make their ability to make money harder. It would just make things more difficult, you know, in general. So I would agree in the sense of you know, the white Christian American archetype that a lot of Jews would probably agree with us in the sense of we don't want to be overtaken in our neighborhood by people who only speak Spanish, because that's going to be it's going to be problematic, right? Because we're not going to be able to communicate, and we're eventually going to be boxed out of our own neighborhoods because we can't do business if we don't speak the language. But again, I would definitely say that there are, I'm for sure, obviously there are some people that are Jewish that are maybe America, not even just America first, America only, and I certainly applaud that. I certainly applaud that. But there are others that I think are more loyal to the Zionist lobby, and I think that that's something that I personally would take issue with. But again, obviously, hashtag not all Jews. I completely understand that.
Well, yeah, and I definitely see that too. Like I'll be at somebody's house and I'll be talking to them and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I was in the army." First thing is everybody asks me when I say I was in the army, everybody immediately asks me if I mean the IDF. So, and then also like a lot of people that have family members who have made Aliyah, which means moved to Israel. And they're talking about it, and like you can tell, they're talking about like their son being honored for service to the IDF and stuff. And it's kind of like I'm sort of thinking like, yeah, I do agree with the people who like if you're putting Israel like on a huge pedestal, then like leave and go there, like no qualms.
Yeah,
Now,
I certainly agree with you on that. And by the way,
if I see something
just
in
to
the
make this
paper
clear to
where
people,
Israel did well, like somebody tried to bomb them and they bombed them back, and and they came out of it, like I'm gonna be like, yeah, go Israel. But I'm not really, that's about the extent of it. Like I'm gonna be happy for them in that regard. So like yeah, I kind of root for. I'm an American first, so hopefully that never happens.
yeah, I mean, I get you. I think there needs to be obviously a respect for a nation's sovereignty, and you're not going to get any disagreements with me in that regard. But like I said, I for one don't think it's possible, and this does not, by the way, just apply to Jews. This applies to really any country or ethnic group. I do not believe in dual citizenship as a concept whatsoever. If I were to be a dictator for a day, that's probably the first thing that I would abolish. I think you have to have a sense of belonging and necessity with survival with your country.
Well, and that's one of the problems that you get from a lot of people immigrating. I mean, there's a picture I recently saw memed on a Discord server where it was in Germany, and there was like one German flag and a whole bunch of Turkish flags. And it's like, yeah, that's not okay. And the Turks were like the first Muslims to go to Germany. So they've been there like 20, 30, 40 fucking years now. And I mean, I will say this, at least the Turks actually went to Germany and like worked, unlike the current wave. But, there's a real, if you come to a new country, like they always like to say, oh, we all, we're all ancestors. When my ancestors came to America, they wanted to be Americans. When I was growing up, my mother put up the American flag outside of our house on like Flag Day, 4th of July, Memorial Day, like certain times in the year, my mother would put up the flag. Like sad things happened, my mother would put it up like half mast. My mother was like big on holidays. You got to dress in green for St. Patrick's Day, everything that comes up, and she was very patriotic. And I used to be like, ugh, and now I'm like, I'm glad, we took it for granted. I think everybody took it for granted when I was growing up. I'm a little older than you. So I was basically growing up mostly in the 80s. And then like I was in high school in the 90s.
Yeah, that's definitely a fundamentally that's a different America than I grew up in. That's for sure. But yeah, I
Yeah.
just even when it comes to like to talk about the conversation regarding Turks in Germany. Again, even the amount of time that they're there, they still form their own communities, and it's problematic. Turks are, they're never going to feel European. And there is a sense of some type of demographic invasion going on in Europe. And obviously, we see Muslim imams talking about this. We've even heard Erdogan, the president or prime minister, whatever his title is, of Turkey, threaten this. And it's definitely it's a problem. It's something that we have to be aware of. And that's why when you look at immigration, it's not just immigration that I think is important. It's also things like birth rates. When you have Islam coming into your country, even if they're not all terrorists, which clearly they're not, no one's making that argument, at least not on this stream. It is a society that does, in some senses, believe in polygamy, whether it's going on or not. I'm not entirely sure, but regardless, they have very, 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 very high birth rates. And they do play the long game in that respect with demographics within a country. And this is another thing we have to be mindful of. If you were to insert, a lot of Muslims into Japan, Japan would be fucked within 100 years because their birth rates are astonishingly low, and they would get voted off their own islands, their own archipelago.
Absolutely. And Japan is, they don't put up with that shit. I mean, that's the funny thing is, like, you get a lot of people who ask, like, well, how come Israel doesn't let them in? How come Japan doesn't let them in? And it's like, because these are countries that just, they say no. And in their cases, for the most part, the population supports it. Now, I don't know what the media is like in Japan, but in Israel, they have the left. People themselves are, for the most part, at this point, right wing. There's a lot of Orthodox Jews who have left, like, the United States and so on and so forth, and gone to, whether they're religiously Orthodox, and usually religiously Orthodox Jews are more likely to be politically right-leaning. Because
that's fine. But I would challenge you on this one assertion. And again, I don't have a problem with it, but I would applaud the Zionist lobby. I would applaud. We're speaking about Israel, speaking about Jewish people being right wing. I applaud that, but I don't necessarily think that they are right wing in the way that a lot of Americans think of right wing. I think that they are right wing in actually how I'm discussing it, which is a blood and soil attachment to their land. And again, I completely applaud that. I understand that's part of it, but I think sometimes people get caught up in they're right wing and they think, oh, they just believe in free markets or the Constitution. When I think if we adopt the old school version, the historically accurate version of right wing, one cannot be a right wing German and be pro right wing in France, because nationalism historically, which I would argue is better than globalism, still is in effect a zero sum game. Someone has to win and someone has to lose.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. You tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, at this point in the US and probably, oh, and by the way, Edward in the chat, DTF is down to fuck. That's what it means. But anyway, for most right wing at this point has become like nationalism and individualism versus globalism. But I do think that there's a lot of people on the left who, and this is changing, but there's people who are voting Democrat and they're not like really like globalists but they're defaultists or whatever. They vote on the left because they read the media. They watch, they watch mainstream media news. I mean, that's one thing. One of my frustrations with the other Jews here in New York City is You ask them, like, where do you stand on borders? Nope, they don't want to open borders. You know, where do you stand on this? Where do you stand on that? And they have all these conservative stances. And then they're like, I hate Trump. And then, like, you're at their house and you realize they've got the fucking mainstream media, they've got the radio, mainstream media news, you know, pumping in their house. And it's like, you know, I mean, I recently heard from somebody, I don't know if it was a stream I was on or just a stream I was listening to, but somebody was saying that in the USSR, they had to have like news radio in their house going at all times, and they weren't allowed to turn it off. The best they could do was turn the volume down to like 1, but I don't know if this is true, but this is what somebody said, that like they could never fully turn it off. It always had to be pumping. So, I mean, you know, people don't understand them. And it frustrates me because, I mean, this is where I think a lot of Jews who are otherwise right leaning in New York City are getting pushed to the left simply because they won't open up their mind to understand, you know, how bad the media is.
Well, I think, yeah, what's interesting is even people from the left, though, like they have a distrust of the media as long as it's not what's considered to be socially acceptable to call their media. So the left will they have a distrust, but it's only of Fox News or Rush Limbaugh or
When I get into it with leftists on like Twitter or Facebook or whatever, immediately they're like Fox News, InfoWars, and it's like, nope, wrong on both counts.
But they've had, and that's kind of an interesting.
And then like Breitbart, but well, and also because one of the other things is these are people that are like, their mind is like to follow like the mainstream media kind of like orders to the civilization. So they think that we're doing the same thing. Like they don't understand the way a lot of us right wingers, especially like the YouTuber right wingers, and you know, honestly, even some of the Facebook right wingers, but I don't think they're quite as hardcore as the YouTuber right wingers. But we're going out, we're doing more sources, we're doing our own research. Like when I tell these left wingers about like the communist group, and they're like InfoWars, you know, Fox News, Breitbart, it's like, no. It's like, I get this shit right off the commies' damn websites myself. You know, I watch the live streams of the protests and the riots. I watch live streams of the commies, you know, talking about this stuff. And I'm also old enough to know my history, you know, and I'm putting history together with what I'm seeing. And it's like, that's how I'm understanding stuff. I'm not using, you know, they think I'm using Fox. You know, I like OANN too more than I like Fox and stuff, but most of Fox is just watered down. And I'm not a fan of Candace Owens, and they've been putting her on, which really upsets me. You know,
Candace Owens is the last stand of what a lot of people refer to as implicit white identity. You know, it's the same thing that they do. And again, I like Dinesh D'Souza more than Candace Owens, but I'm still not a huge fan of Dinesh. Is that, you know, the conservatives are so afraid of being called racist, and what they do is they card out ethnic minorities that say the same things as them. All right, so they essentially card out people that have points of view, or at least parrot points of view, that are associated with being white. And they kind of use these minorities as a shield to protect them from the racist meme. And I for one think it's chicken shit. I'm tired of it. I think that that people need to come out and just embrace who they are and have these and have a more honest discussion about where these ideas come from and what they're fundamentally attached to. I think, you know, I would agree with you. I'm tired of Candace Owens. I didn't really particularly like her ever, and I think she's a hack. That's my opinion. I think she's a hack. I think she's a complete hack.
JNC is saying she's talking in whiteface.
Yeah, she's 100% correct. And listen, a lot of other people do that, and you see conservative media; they can't wait to have the black dude in the MAGA hat do their talking for them. And I think, as a criticism of conservatives, that there is a degree of cowardice to that. We have to hide behind the minorities to push our points because we're afraid of being called racist. I think it's ridiculous.
Well, and they also, if they're doing that, they don't really and truly understand, embrace, and work from what's going on with, like, say, the Alinsky rules. We need people on the right to understand stuff like the Alinsky rules. Like, them calling us racist, that's part of the Alinsky rules. They're doing that to break us down. It's not because they actually think we're racist.
Well, certainly at the top of the groups, in the elite level. So I've heard a lot of people talk about this. If you were to go back into the 70s or 80s, maybe even, it might even go as far back as the 60s, which is pretty interesting, and go into the Soviet Union and have a discussion about the proletariat and the bourgeoisie and the working class with the elites, they would laugh in your face, right? That's the narrative that they put out, but they didn't really believe in it. The revolution had long since gone, and at that point, the elites were strictly interested in maintaining power. I don't think that Hillary Clinton, well, she's a special kind of crazy, but I don't think that George Soros thinks that you or I are racist for having a conversation about immigration. He just knows the power of that meme, and I think the people who do believe it are unfortunately the white middle class and the increasingly majority minority working class. They definitely believe it, and that is certainly the danger of that racist meme. Now, I would agree, people on the very top, they don't believe in the racist meme whatsoever. They're just perpetrating it to get a divide and conquer situation. But the bottom certainly believes it, and that is one of the things that throws gas on the fire towards people like you and me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's rule number 5 of the Alinsky rules, which is it amounts to pick on people. I think reads like it's a scholarly version of pick on people, but it's like, derision is your best enemy or something like that. So I don't know how you're feeling, but we've been streaming and my stream is like cutting in and out. So I don't know if you like are ready to call it a night yet.
Yeah, I saw one question from someone that I wanted to address, and then we could call it in. Michelle A had asked a few minutes ago, or not quite, more of a comment that she wanted our opinions on. Let me scroll up here. I'm sorry, Michelle. The chat goes fast, and then you lose it. You got to scroll back up. What the hell is this? She says, I hear you, but I'm still worried that the left will abuse voter rolls and data. They will use them against us like they feared Trump would do. I just want to touch on that real quick, and this is maybe not the best way to end the stream. This could be a long diatribe. The elections, in my opinion, if you really look at the past, particularly the past 30 years of this country, have largely been a joke because both sides, both the Democrat and the Republican, have been awful in almost every single instance. So usually I'm kind of black-pilled on being really worried about the voter rolls because these are things they're already engaging in fraud. I think that the left is capable of fraud because it's, like I said, it's a bottom-up issue. As a society, we've come to accept certain things. We believe too much in democracy and not in the overall character or makeup of our society.
They've been caught.
Of course. And that's what I tell people too. I've had some people, I think Michelle A has been a follower of mine for a really, really long time. And, she's probably one of the very first.
Right. You said she was like first or second.
Yeah. And she has asked a lot about and I forget the exact name of the bill because I'm a little bit, I'm drawing a blank on it. I think was it the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which essentially, legalized propaganda to be used against the American people. And this is one of these things that I don't really think is that big of a deal. And the reason why I don't think it's that big of a deal is it being illegal is not going to stop them. They just do it anyway.
Nothing stops
They-
the
they-
left. That's
yeah.
what most Republicans or right-leaning people just don't understand that. Even like moderate left people, they just don't get that, like, the left is not playing by the rules. Like, they just don't understand that. They don't grasp that stuff. When I was a purple-pilled conservative, I didn't grasp that stuff.
Yes, and that is again why I think we need to have a conversation about the true nature of power and the strategy that we're going to use going forward. Because at the end of the day, only one side of the political aisle is even attempting, and again, this is still debatable, but is even attempting to, quote, abide by the Constitution. That ultimately does hurt the American conservative movement. And I got to be honest, I'm getting exhausted, so I got to tap out.
We should do this another time, though. I feel like, your chat seemed.
I think I lost her there again. Yeah, she cut out. Yeah, you cut out big time there.
Okay, yeah, I was like, I froze on my end, and I was like, I don't know if you can hear me. I froze. Yeah, my computer is getting hot too. And
well, listen, I agree. We could totally do this again. It was a good time, and I just want to thank all the people for joining us. A lot of these people were on my stream too, so it's a lot of listening to me ramble, which I know can be a bit much sometimes. So, guys, thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for having me on your channel.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks
Have a
for
great night,
stopping by
everyone.
my channel. We'll see you next time.
Take it easy.